what we've put together is a four-part virtual education series that'll be presented over the next several months, this being the first of the four. The role that we play as Blue Whale oftentimes is quite a consultative role for most of the clients that we're working with. We don't see many statements of work. We don't see many requirements documents, but we do have lots and lots of organizations reaching out to us on a daily basis, trying to uncover what their plan needs to be or needs to look like as they move forward. Some industries are setting guidelines. Some territory states, for example, have legislation that mandates what it is that they're expected to do. But if you're coming to us from the Mid-Atlantic, the majority of what we're operating with today is very minimal legislation and very little guideline. So Blue Whale becomes extremely consultative in the role to assist from the very beginning of the concept, the idea, the design. Most organizations are getting a little bit of pressure from either their tenants, their employees. They're looking to differentiate what it is they can offer as an amenity. Other companies are looking to potentially monetize with the use of these devices. So one thing I think that's in common with all of us is as we turn on the TV every evening, either in the news or part of the commercials that we watch, we're seeing just a tremendous amount of intro to EV as a vehicle. And many of us have either taken the step to purchase one or we're in that consideration phase of, does this make sense for me and what does it look like? So this four-part series is really an opportunity to take the wealth of information that becomes available to Blue Whale EV and offer it to you all about what some of these next steps might look like. In this particular series, we've brought in one of our partners, so we'll get a little technical on what the devices and so forth look like. Just a quick housekeeping piece before we move forward. There's a chat button if you're unfamiliar with Zoom. We plan to have, about 20% of the presentation will be set aside for Q&A purposes. So if you see something that we're talking about and you'd like to know more about it, just throw it up in the chat for us. And either Nick, myself, or Randy will make our best effort to address it at the tail end of the webinar. So again, thanks for joining, and I hope you find this useful. It's a combination of many projects, hundreds of projects, lots of people, and we're really trying to take the best of those things that come from the work that we do and make that available through the course of these webinars. So next slide, Nick. So let's just real quickly give you an idea who's on the panel to talk with you about this session. Obviously myself, Scott Swiderski, my role within Blue Whale EV is the Chief Marketing Officer. I do get involved with quite a number of other tactical areas within the company, but mostly focus on what it is that we do from a marketing perspective. Nick?
My name is Nick McNulty. I'm the director of our client success team. My job is really to help ensure that projects are moving through from start to finish, and that we're getting the best possible implementation in place for a customer based on what their EV needs are going to be, both currently and in the near future. A big part of EV implementation today is making sure that you're right-sided for what you're going to need in the next 3 to 5 years and beyond. So that's really what I do. I'll pass it to Randy.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you, Scott. Good morning, everybody. My name is Randy Etman, and I am a regional sales director here at Blink Charging. And first and foremost, I want to thank both Nick and Scott for inviting me to be a part of this webinar today. It is certainly my honor and privilege to be here, and we certainly value the relationship and the partnership that we have with Blue Whale EV, and certainly we are very humbled to be a part of this. As I said, I'm a regional sales director here at Blink Charging. I have been in the EVSE space for about about 10 years. And so it has been an amazing journey to watch this industry unfold and really to where it is today, from the early days of just a couple of cars being on the road to where we are with just every automobile manufacturer having some sort of electric vehicle in their portfolio. And it is just a great time to be learning about EV charging and how it can be implemented in your property. And certainly a lot of what we do, both from a manufacturer and certainly, as Scott alluded to, from a partnership standpoint, is education and providing our clients with all the necessary information that they have or need to be able to make a decision on implementing EV charging. And that is our goal here today, certainly from the manufacturer aspect of Blink, to provide you, that insight and education and answer questions that you have. So again, my honor and privilege to be here.
Thanks, Randy.
Yeah, thanks, Randy and Nick. Also to mention, Blink is headquartered here out of Bowie, Maryland. So if there's ever an opportunity of wanting to see a very rapidly growing organization that's chaotic but efficient in its approach to develop devices, that's always an open opportunity. So I want to just real quickly give you some context on what Blue Whale EV is, because I think it's important as we go through this that we're not just reselling devices. In fact, that's really a smaller part of what we do. We manage this complete end-to-end process, and I'll move to the next slide here in just a moment, but it'll really describe for you what a traditional or typical type of engagement involves. We'll talk a little bit about the timeframes that are involved for implementing these type of devices. We'll look at the complexities of dealing with the county, the engineering components, the construction components, and so forth. We'll talk a lot about how this gets done and what area of expertise is required to do it. So Blue Whale EV really in its business plan has designed this complete end-to-end program that allows our customers to make contact with us, generally in the conceptual stage of where it is that they want to be. As I said a little bit earlier, everybody is reaching out to us with a little bit of a different need. But if I was to sort of quantify the two most important areas that they're looking for, one is the amenity, obviously to service either the employee that they have within a commercial site, a tenant that they might have in a multi-facility, and the other would be this consideration of rather than an amenity, choosing to bring these devices closer to their facilities for purposes of drawing new traffic and the potential for monetization or an increase of monetization to their business. So we're kind of seeing a pretty broad spectrum. The third outlier to that is the consideration of fleet. We'll give you an example of what that looks like. More organizations than you can imagine are really strongly considering some sort of a plan around a zero emissions footprint. And so while there's not an enormous amount of legislation necessarily in place to demand that this be the case for organizations that are operating fleets, there are quite a number of incentive and rebates for companies to be influenced as to the why they might want to do this today. So we'll chat a little bit about that too. So really think of Blue Whale EV as just this complete comprehensive end-to-end group. We've put all the right people in place to be able to manage the process and to answer the questions, and they expedite the process as best as we can. So what does this installation process look like as we go through it? You'll notice that in phase one, the site planning and the prep, we spend a lot of time in feasibility stages of people's consideration for how to move forward. We're dealing in all industries, so everyone from automakers to public sector organizations, state, local, federal. We're seeing a lot of interest in multifamily and commercial real estate, as well as retail, hospitals, hospitality. So regardless of what it is that you're doing with your organization, it's not unusual that we're starting to put either the beginning of a footprint for an e-mobility solution in place, or we're expanding an existing one, or the one that maybe an organization put in place 3 and 4 years ago is investigating the idea of a tech refresh. So we'll go through quite a bit of that too. But so phase one, as I mentioned, lots of time being spent looking at the site, walking these sites, really trying to understand the scope and the level of interest that our clients have in implementing these type of devices. Not only where it is going to exist physically, but obviously taking a look at the mechanical components. What are the power requirements? Where is this power going to come from? Does it exist currently? Are we intended or potentially going to have the utility involved with us throughout the course of this for purposes of upgrading and so forth? So everything you see in yellow is a lot of what we're doing there. A lot of technical writing presented to us. We're having to write that requirement. So that is another part of what we do on a real typical basis. Once all those steps are completed, we move to phase two, where the actual installation of the devices occurs. It's interesting that we spend less time in the installation, and certainly a lot more time defining the requirements in phase one. Installation is on any different level. This is really the construction period of the project. This is where we've deployed at this point our electricians, folks that are potentially having to bore from the location of where the panels and so forth are that we're working from out to the actual EV chargers, setting the stations in their concrete pads and so forth, and ultimately all things inclusive of what that might look like from an installation perspective. The third piece would what we refer to as phase three, which is the activation stage. This assumes that all things in phase one and phase two went smoothly, and we're now starting to address the customer onboarding. If you don't have these stations existing at one of your sites today, there are a multitude of ways to provide this service. Either it can be a cost to the employee or to the tenant, or you can decide to make them members. Those members can either initiate their charging activation process through RFID cards. They can have the app that's available with most of our partners to activate the charging session. This is all done very quickly, and I'll give you some examples of what that might look like. Generally, we assign administrators to the platform, the software platform itself, so that all these things can be controlled from their desktop, or for that matter, from their phone. So next slide, Nick. This is an example of what I'm calling a relevant project. This is a client of ours that occupies in or around about 40,000 square feet. One of the things that they were interested in doing was addressing the issue of EV charging by making charging stations available. So they moved to these L2 devices. Randy will talk a little bit more about the different stages and levels of the device. They wanted their employees, they were interested in having their employees come back to work. And as they were starting to move from a fairly casual plan around, return to work, and a more formal plan for return to work, they thought that this might help. In addition to that, there were employees of this particular organization that were beginning to show interest. They had some folks driving hybrid plug-in. There were others just looking at purely BEV. So the company decided that this was the right thing to do, and that they needed to move quite quickly on this. So here's just an example, completely scalable. They put in 4 plugs for an employee base of roughly about 60 personnel. This site can be expanded quite quickly based on some of the future proofing that we did in the design. And that is really the intent of what this customer was hoping to do. We started out with some algorithms and thought processes around what percentage of their existing parking spaces needed to be converted. And we quickly moved off of that because in this particular situation, they had a pretty known idea of how many people were driving EV vehicles, and they were setting the course for what they wanted to do in 2023 and then what this might look like in the 2026 phase. So we future-proofed to 2026 for them to add additional devices over the years. But their employees are happy that these devices exist. And that as new employees acquire EV vehicle, that there's really little to no cost for them. The company in this example has decided to make this available as an amenity to their employees. So happy employees when they know that their fuel cost is gone and that they have the luxury of charging at work. Next slide. Wanted to point out this piece, when these projects are completed, and this is really in that phase 2 category that I described earlier around steps that are needed to get one of these type of projects done. The upper right image that you see there, that's actually Under Armour. So Under Armour has decided to come up with a design plan that helps to identify the where EV charging in their facility and within their parking spots would occur. But this is quite common. So in addition to all the electrical, mechanical, and technology decisions that we help our customers to make, there's an additional service that we provide that might include lighting. It might include surveillance. Those are all considerations that our customers are looking at today, but painting, bollards and line striping and so forth are all also part of the considerations that our customers are making today too. So wanted to just give you an idea when we talk about comprehensive, it's not just tell me what sort of devices I think I need and give me a sense for what the construction planning might involve as well as the cost, but actually getting down to the detail of the look and feel of the finished product. So hopefully these few examples have helped you to understand sort of the approach that we're taking. This is an example of some of the customers that we're working with today. As I mentioned in the earlier slides, it's across the board. I mean, we're seeing everything from retail, commercial real estate, multifamily, PubSec, federal agencies, fleet consideration, hospitality, and so forth. And so you can see how all these various logos that are for most recognizable brands are beginning their process of electrifying, their site locations. All right, I'm going to hand it off to Randy, who's going to take us through the devices and the varying types of devices. This is a decision also that needs to be made about the experience that the folks that have these vehicles are going to go through. So I'll turn it over to you, Randy.
Great. Thank you so much, Scott. Greatly appreciate that. And again, certainly happy to be here and happy to provide some insight and education to the EV space. And we're going to jump right in and get started. So Nick, next slide, please. So as Scott mentioned, a variety of charging options that are available to consumers today, whether we're talking about L2 solutions or we're talking about DC fast charging solutions. Here at Blink Charging, we have a variety of options available to our clients. And the fact that, we have a solution that's going to fit into no matter what the scenario is or no matter what the vertical market is that we're looking to address or that Blue Whale EV is looking to address. We have a product that's going to be able to fit into that. So whether we're talking about home charging, public charging, fleet and public, there is just a wide variety of options that we have to work with, from our Series 4, our home-based unit, to our Series 7 and Series 8 for our fleet and or public sort of accessible type of options, and then all the way out to our level 3 or DCFC fast charging options from a 30 kilowatt unit on the low end all the way up to 350 kW on the high end. And we're going to dig into a little bit more of these, but this just kind of gives you a good overview of the variety of options that we have to offer. Next slide. So let's just dig into a little bit about the family of L2 EV charging stations. I'm going to start with my left, moving to right. So our Series 4, that is our home-based solution, a 50 amp unit. So if you're familiar with the same look and feel of the particular product like you see that you may already be associating with, or you're working with at either your workplace setting or government entity, we can provide that same look and feel with our Series 4 unit, giving you the ability to charge at home. Move into our Series 5. This solution is for that condominium or HOA type situation to where you have a dedicated or deeded parking spot. This will provide you, again, that same look and feel, but all the amenities that you're looking for in an L2 smart solution, such as revenue capture, access control. You'll have the ability to implement that with our Series 5, but it is, again, designed for that HOA or deeded spot. We're going to move into our Series 6. This had been the flagship product for Blink for many, many years, or SemaConnect for many, many years. Again, this is a commercial-based application, and this fits into a wide variety of scenarios, whether it is multifamily, commercial, real estate, really across the board. That is a great solution. Series 5 and 6, those are our 30 amp solutions. And then we're going to move into our Series 7 and Series 8. Series 7 and Series 8, as you can see, very, very similar in look. They are both configured in either a 48 or an 80 amp unit. So on the 48 amp, you're going to be able to see about 9.2 kilowatts dispersed. And then on the 80 amp, up to about 19.2 kilowatts dispersed. One thing you'll see with the differentiation between 5 and 6 and 7 and 8, Series 5 and 6 are a single head unit with a single plug. But as we move into our Series 7 and Series 8, this is a dual configured unit. So you'll have one unit with two standard J1772 cords with 18 feet of cord. Can be equipped up to a 25-foot optional cord if needed. But as you can see, all very, very similar in design. The other big differentiating factor between the Series 7 and Series 8, and it's kind of hard to see, but just below those green lights on the Series 8, you'll see that is actually a forward-facing credit card swipe or reader. So if you're in a retail situation, maybe a university, hospitality, to where the client wants to be able to have that forward-facing credit card reader, EV driver can simply swipe their credit card. They can do tap to pay, Google Pay, any of those to initiate the charging session, and they can be on their way in just a matter of seconds. One thing too, I will point out, and I think there may be a slide, but I just wanted to point this out while we're here looking at the entire portfolio. Number one, you'll kind of notice the unique design to the units. These are all cast aluminum construction. They are all NEMA 3R rated. So they are meant to be outdoors in the elements, regardless of whether you're in the heat, the cold, the extreme climates. These are all going to perform day in and day out flawlessly. The other thing too that you'll notice is the series of LED indicators on the units themselves. Those indicators will indicate a specific function taking place within the unit. They are all indicated here showing green. That means actually a charge is taking place in the vehicle. If they were to all be illuminated in blue, that means the stations are readily available. So when an EV driver pulls up to them, they'll know that they are ready to be able to plug into that vehicle. And then once the vehicle has completed its charge, that driver is also going to get a text message and email letting them know their vehicle is done charging. The other thing too, I just wanted to point out with all of our units here, Series 5 through 8, they can all be configured in either a wall mount or a pedestal mount configuration, and all have an optional cable management system available with them, which means you have the ability to stretch that cord out the 18 feet, and then that cable management system will retract that cable so you don't have to worry about the cords being coiled back up manually. It'll be done automatically. Nick, we can move into the next slide. So here we're going to just jump into a little bit about the DC fast charging portfolio, or level 3. You may have heard this being referred to. As you can see on the low end, we have the 30 kilowatt wall mounted or can be a pedestal mounted unit. And then in between, we have a 60, 90, 120, 150, and 180 kW DCFC. And then all the way out to 360 kilowatt with dispensers. So as you can see, we have a wide variety, both not in just the L2, but also in that DC fast charging portfolio. to be able to, provide you either in a fleet application or a municipal government setting. We're going to have a solution that is going to be able to be custom tailored to your specific situation. And that's where, working with an organization such as Blue Whale EV, that consultative approach comes into play, to where they can truly assess the scenario, assess the situation, and then be able to provide you with a solution that's going to be, applicable given your specific situation. Next slide, Nick. So just some of the core features, a lot of this we had talked about in that initial slide, but just wanted to provide a quick recap on that as well. So as we've mentioned, that at a glance LED status, station owners and EV drivers really like that, in the fact that they can pull up to the station, or they can look across the parking lot and see exactly what's going on with the station. They can know that it's either readily available, or they can know that there is a vehicle in front of the station charging, or potentially maybe there's a vehicle in front of the station and not charging. So they'll know exactly what's going on with the station just by those LEDs being illuminated. As I'd mentioned, that sleek and compact form factor with that rugged outdoor cast aluminum enclosure, that is NEMA 3R rated. So regardless of the elements, these stations are going to perform flawlessly day in and day out. All of our stations are wireless in communication they communicate via cellular trans receiver. And then our station owners have the ability to manage and control and view data from their station through a cloud-based station management platform. There, they'll have the ability to view a wide variety of reports, such as usage reports, sustainability reports, and a whole host of other information that they'll be able to gain through that cloud-based portal. Our stations are, again, all smart EV charging stations, meaning they have the ability to communicate. So EV drivers have the ability through their smartphone to access the station, either to initiate the charging session and or get communication back from the station when their vehicle has completed its charge. With our stations as well, they have the ability to utilize RFID card, and in some instances, like with our Series 8, we have that credit card reader available, so they can initiate that charging session simply swiping their MasterCard, Visa, American Express, or Tap to Pay, Google Pay, and initiate that charging session right via that method as well. And as I'd mentioned, all of our stations are set up with a couple of features in mind, certainly one of them being revenue capture and then access control. And so we can manage and handle all of that revenue capture behind the scenes for our station owners. So let's just talk a little bit about vehicle compatibility and some of the plug configurations that are out there currently. So level 2, this is the standard plug on all vehicles produced here in North America. So it is the J1772. This plug you will find both on plug-in hybrid and all electric vehicles. And the one thing I will point out too, as we kind of talk about some of the products that we've referred to in a couple of the slides back, whether it's L2 or DCFC, one of the things that you'll find with the plug-in hybrids specifically, and that's what I drive, is a plug-in hybrid. I can only utilize the level 2 charging station. I don't have the ability to use a DC fast charger. So it's imperative when you're looking at a solution that you understand also the types of vehicles that you're going to potentially be charging, because as I mentioned, the plug-in hybrid electric vehicles can only utilize that J1772 and L2 solution. As we move into the DC fast chargers, you'll see there's a few different plug configurations here. We have either, the Tesla configuration, which now is becoming known as the North America configuration or standard for plugs. We have the CCS, and then we have the CHAdeMO. And as you can see here, only battery electric vehicles can charge with the DC fast chargers. So that is, what you'll see with any of the DCFCs, one of those three typical configurations. I will tell you, for the most part, you're going to see either Tesla or CCS. CHAdeMO is kind of an older technology that's starting to be phased out. That was primarily used with Nissan back in the early days of the Nissan Leaf. And now they're starting to migrate more towards that CCS standard. So, as it shows, public charging still matters. Public chargers would need to deliver more than 20% of the electricity consumed by electric vehicles in 2030. And we know that the vast majority of charging is going to be done in one of two places. It's either going to be done at home, so your multifamily, your single family, your garden style homes, or it's going to be done at the workplace. That is where the vast majority of the charging is going to be done. And then as you can see, the rest of it is made up by, fleet, on the go, and retail. But again, we know typically, the vast majority of that charging is going to be done, residential, workplace, and continues to kind of, hold true as we, move out from not just 2021, but into years beyond. So as we talk about home and public charging, EV drivers who can't charge at home or at work need to use public level 2 and DC fast charging stations. So we're just going to kind of give you a quick glimpse as to what you can expect from a cost or a charge, perspective, as far as what it may cost you to charge. So at home, you're typically going to find, about 16 cents per kilowatt hour to charge your vehicle. With that, you're going to get, 25 to 30 miles of range. So as you can see, very economical to be able to charge your vehicle at home. And that's one of the misnomers I like to dispel. A lot of times people think that it's going to increase their electrical bill significantly when they start charging their vehicle at home, but not necessarily the case. As you can see, roughly 16 cents per kilowatt hour to charge your vehicle. As we move into public level 2, potentially around 44 cents, to maybe 50 cents per kilowatt hour to charge at a public level 2 charging station. Again, depending on the amount of range that you're going to need to put back in your vehicle would determine how long you would potentially be at that level 2 station. And then DCFC, or that level 3, approximately 59 cents per kilowatt hour. And in there, depending on the output of that DC fast charger, your vehicle could be charged to 80 to 90% completion in anywhere from, 25, 30 minutes, maybe to 40 or 50 minutes. Again, just depending on the output of that DC fast charger. And that finishes my portion. And I think, Nick, am I passing to you, I think, for some EV market trends?
You're on mute, Nick.
That's helpful. So I can speak to some EV market trends a bit, just to talk about what we're seeing across the industry with respect to the direction that EV is going and how the market is growing. Some just obvious things that we can point out. Cost savings, obviously we're up significantly in terms of in comparison to traditional combustion engine vehicles. Similarly, we're seeing that the performance for these vehicles is obviously a top of the line thing that's being invested in. We're seeing, anybody that's driven a Tesla has seen that, being able to travel from 0 to 60 in just a couple of seconds is obviously a change in comparison to some of the standard vehicles they've driven before. Additionally, there's obviously large sustainability pushes that we're getting both at a government level and in terms of just, less pollution, trying to reduce dependence on fossil fuels, and general use of these vehicles on a day-to-day basis. For the battery technology, also we're seeing, significant advances and the way that the batteries themselves are being produced is increasing and it's coming to the US as well. I think, Scott, you had mentioned you may want to speak to this a little bit as well. So did you have something you wanted to add here?
Yeah, these are really the drivers. These are the variables that have folks as a consumer considering the why they would move towards this direction. I mean, you've touched on really all of it, Nick. The industry, it's become a very, very competitive industry, even in its emerging side of the market. Everybody is after longer ranges. Everybody is after shorter charging times. So as you heard from Randy, the move to even at some point make these hybrid vehicles capable of fast charging, I suspect will be something we'll see on the table here relatively soon. But, you look at Stellantis, you look at Ford, you look at Chevy, and then you look at some of these more luxury vehicle types, whether it's Tesla, Audi, or Volvo, or whomever. The market has moved tremendously with the number of products that are intended to hit market, if not now, over the next 12 months. This is not a Tesla play anymore. It's an environment that has SUVs, it has pickup trucks, it has smaller, more economical type vehicles in play. So it's across the board, really becoming a part of every type of an option that you would want. And we've got some good recommendations too as to how to find what's out there that might meet your price point in terms of the ideal vehicle for yourself, whether that's hybrid, which we refer to as PHEV, or it's purely an electric vehicle. We refer the acronym as BEV. So albeit that's not the business that we're in, it's relevant to what we do. And so we become quite knowledgeable about the manufacturers and their products and that kind of thing.
So I can speak to this a bit, or Scott, you're welcome to, but just to jump into it, I think one of the important things that we track or have been watching from the beginning is just the cycle, the adoption cycle that comes with EV charging and where this is at. So you can see in the chart on the right there, we're kind of in the stage now where we're stepping out of just tech enthusiasts being the ones that are driving these EV vehicles. And we're stepping into the section where now we've got visionaries and early adopters that are starting to really jump on board and want to invest in EV charging and electric vehicles in general. The next step from here is to move into that section that we refer to as the chasm. But after we move through that, that's when you really start to see the majority of people jump in and want to get into EV charging and driving EV vehicles. You can see on the left-hand side here, we're already at a point where you're seeing 2+ million EVs in the United States. And in 2022, it was 5.8% of all new sales in the US were EV vehicles. And one of the things that we like to use as an example is to watch what you see in Europe and where their kind of tipping point really was. Started at 5%, and then they hit 10%, and from there it really started to take off. So there are certainly in certain areas of the United States, you've got California, you've got the East Coast, New York, Florida, areas where you've got major city centers. They're really going to follow that pattern and drive EV sales at that point. Scott, I know you like to speak to this part. Is there anything additional you'd add to this?
No, I think you have it covered. I mean, one of the luxuries we have as a service provider in the mid-Atlantic markets is watching what the Northeast is doing. And you mentioned some of the more popular adoption states, Texas, Florida, California being a major outlier to all the other states. But if you genuinely believe that the momentum that's behind these states is likely to become a reality for all things we're doing in the mid-Atlantic and southern territories and so forth, this 5% that we're seeing today is going to grow very, very rapidly. The other thing, Nick, that I would talk about is as the adoption rate grows to the extent that we know it will, the demand for all of this infrastructure is going to pick up very, very significant. And even just a year ago, the products just weren't there. I mean, most of the products in market were a pendulum of either, luxury vehicle or a lower end product like a Nissan Leaf or a Ford Focus or some form of a hybrid. So as the market continues to get flooded with all these different options, and people are, or in the past saying, there's just not something that's available for me in market that I like. Once those barriers continue to get broken down by the manufacturers, it's just going to put more and more pressure on those of us that own building asset to address what it is that we're intended to do. The second thing, or I should say the third thing that'll follow on with that is the feds are pumping considerable monies, obviously through the incentive and rebate that Nick will talk about in just a little bit, but even from the consumer perspective, the rebates that are available to consume and to make this transition is also quite attractive. So all the things that are here in these few little diagrams that we're sharing with you right now aren't our guesses. They're actuals, and a lot of it is predicated on other areas of information that we're getting either from early adoption states and or examples that we see overseas.
To jump back in, one of the things that we talk about all the time, and it's kind of a new term. I'm sure if any of you've watched the news lately, you've heard the term charge anxiety. We like to speak that there's a change in the vehicle fueling paradigm, right? A lot of people are used to filling up their car at gas stations, which is you see your needle gets close to E, and you just pull into a gas station and you're able to fill up alongside the road. The change with EV charging is really a shift in the way that we think about fueling our vehicles. So most of the time you're going to get the majority of your charge, and we talked about this a bit, at home or at work. So at home you're looking at your home chargers, the level 1 or a level 2 home charger that's able to charge your vehicle overnight, which is when you're going to do the majority of your charging. Similarly, if you show up at work, you're able to plug in there. That's a way that you can get quite a few hours back to back while charging. And then really, as you move up the pyramid that we see there, that's when you start to look at retail spaces, the level 3 charging options we talked about, and up and coming more and more, especially with programs like NEVI. You see stations along the road that you'd be able to pull up and charge at in an instance where you need something, in an immediate charging option. So really between those three things, that's how you start to manage that term charge anxiety. And you focus on being able to charge while at home and while at work for, a period of time. So moving forward, I just want to quickly go over a couple of these slides before we get into some of the rebates and incentives. I'm watching our time, and I want to make sure we have some time for questions as well. So to quickly just talk about what we're seeing with DC, and really the whole point of this slide is that across the board in many major cities, especially our nation's capital and the greater DMV area, there is a huge push to not only buy and drive EV vehicles, but there's a push to get the infrastructure in place, as well as just the ability to charge for anybody that's getting these vehicles. So this is just something that I want to make sure that people are aware of. It's coming, it's not going away, and there are a lot of those that are in power are pushing for EV incentives and programs to increase this. So to quickly go through some funding programs, I just want to talk to this because I think it's important. The big thing with EV charging is how do I get a return on my investment? So I think there's something we want to talk to with that. It's just not about, how much can I charge people to pull up and charge while at my charger? There's some other pieces to this that you take into consideration when looking at EV chargers. So to quickly go through some of these items, you're going to attract more drivers to your location. If you're in a retail space or a space that benefits from having multiple people come to where you're located, these are just a way to do that, either as an amenity or as a revenue producing option. Similarly, they can generate a charging revenue. There are a few different business models that you can put in place to either have it set up so that you're just recouping the cost of that electricity. You can add a premium to it if you want to charge a bit more. And try to recapture some of that additionally quicker. And then lastly, there are things like idling fees that you can work into your setup, so that if someone were to be plugged in and stay longer than they should in that space, you can charge them a premium for that time, and that'll also bring you some income there. Additionally, extended dwell time. 89% of EV chargers, or drivers, I should say, make a retail purchase while charging. So if someone pulls up and is charging at your retail location, they're just that much more likely to get out and spend some time in your store. And then lastly, it builds brand loyalty. So those who know where their chargers are located, their go-to chargers, they're going to come back time and time again to those same chargers because they know they can get, they can fuel up their car while there. The NEVI state plan is it's quite robust, quite frankly. And we're pointing out two of the major locations where we do installs and where there's a significant amount of funding at this point, both in Maryland and in Virginia, where there are big pushes to get more EV chargers out there for EV drivers. You can see that there's a significant amount of money that's being allocated and spent to bring in these charging stations and increase the infrastructure for those that drive EV cars. We'll talk a little bit more in depth about the funding programs that are out there. In most situations, there are three major programs that would be available for you. In Maryland and Virginia, which are the two that we're talking about primarily today, in Maryland, there's a state program, there is a federal program, and then there's a utility program, all of which would be able to assist with recapturing some of that cost that you're investing into putting in these charging spaces and the infrastructure that supports them. Virginia right now does not have a state program that's open, but they do have utility programs that are open. And of course, the federal program is also there. Similarly, we've worked with some of our state and government programs to put together grants or grants submissions, applications that they'd be able to reach out. And then there are certain counties, especially in Virginia right now, that are coming out with their own programs. So as part of what Blue Whale does is our overall review and design for your setup, your implementation, is look at what programs you might be eligible for the infrastructure and charger install. And then we will provide that information to you. We keep our finger on the pulse of that because it does update pretty frequently. And just let you know what you might be able to get back for going forward with a program or a project like this. State and utility incentive rebate programs, you can see where they're at right now. There's in Maryland, there's a pretty good state program. The utility and private incentives are even better. In Virginia right now, this graph is a little misleading. They did have a good state program, but it's really now transitioned more to the utility company and private incentives that are available. So we can speak to those. From there, we've got some FAQs, just some things that we can go over, and I'll turn it back to Scott. We can kind of bounce around these questions, talk through these, and then open it up to any questions that maybe the group has. So Scott, I'll turn it to you.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, I wanted to mention in our step-by-step program, Nick's department, our client success team, is managing the availability of the rebate programs. So as part of what we do, not only as a value add, but to be able to point out specifically where these programs are. Nick mentioned they're a moving target. Some of them get funded later in the calendar year. And so it's not a perfect process, but people are depending upon Blue Whale to inform them as to when these monies become available and how that ties into the timeline of their project plan. So, that all is coming out of Nick's group within the organization. So thanks, Nick. Mm-hmm. One question I think, Nick, you could answer maybe at some point is, based on what we're seeing, what percentage of projects that we're performing on are being offset by the incentive and the rebate? I think that's a pretty common question that comes up.
Yeah, I'd be happy to field that question. The federal program is pretty open. There's a lot of people that fall into qualified for that. It's really just based on your tax return, your federal tax return, and it is the equivalent of about 6% of the overall project. Most people that are putting in EV chargers right now are eligible for that. The only ones that wouldn't be are those that are not submitting a federal tax return at the end of the year. For the utility programs, they're very specific. Just to give an example, in Maryland right now, the BGE utility program is open for multifamily and fleet, as well as small businesses or businesses that were started in Maryland. So that's, a bit more specific. But then if you get into, the state programs, those open up for anybody that would qualify with the approved chargers that have the power available. So from a, what percentage of those that are looking to get EV chargers put in are eligible for some kind of rebate, you're close to 100% are available for some kind of incentive program. The amount that they're eligible for, I would say, figure 6% to start, and then you'd build up from there as to what's available.
Thanks, Nick.
Mhm.
Yeah, I know there's not a whole lot of time that we have available, so I don't know that we want to necessarily use it all to go through these 12 or 13 FAQs. But if you'll just kind of read through these FAQs as we started this discussion off, so many questions come into us. Most, if not all, of the customers that we're working with, this is a first-time initiative. There's really no history that could tell most of our clients what this is supposed to cost. They don't have much, if any, familiarity on the behaviors of their adoption plan. So, without all this information, it becomes really difficult to develop the most simplest thing, which is a plan. And that plan that they're looking for is largely provided as an advisory service by Blue LEV. But these type of questions that you see in this list are an example of what becomes common in our conversations. And then the list just really goes on and on and on from there. These are all things that you would need to know, irregardless of the size, scope, or complexity of your project. So if there is a question from the group that's here in attendance, if you wouldn't mind just putting it up in the chat. I did see one come in from Bob, so we're going to throw this one to Randy. Bob is asking the question, what is the specific difference, Randy, between 7 and 7 Plus?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to answer that. So the biggest difference between the 7 and 7 Plus is the amperage output. So our Series 7 is going to be a 48 amp unit producing about 9.2 kilowatts. And then the Series 7 Plus, which is an 80 amp unit, that's going to have an output of about 19.2 kilowatts. And then the same holds true as we move into the Series 8. That is the same differentiating factor on the 8 and the 8 Plus is that amperage output, 48 amp versus 80 amp. But the difference between the Series 7 and the Series 8 would be that forward-facing credit card reader. So if you've got a specific application that requires a credit card reader, you may feel there'd be a value for the credit card reader. That Series 8 is going to be a great option for you.
Thanks, Randy. And we'll wait to see if any other questions reappear, but just this slide is in place just really as a reminder that this is a 4-part series. We will continue to share information that's becoming available every day, week over week to the Blue LEV staff. The goal behind these webinars is just to share with folks that are likely to be where most of our customers are today, which is in the front end of a planning initiative, a scalable initiative, whatever that might be. There's a lot of talk circling around. Well, we've had a couple L2s in the past, but everybody seems to want DCFC. So we're going to focus on topics like that. We're going to bring at a future state in the series, we're going to bring conversations around alternative power sources like solar and how those microgrid components can also be, integrated with EV charging. We're going to continue to talk around practicalities and realities. Those seem to be very top of mind for most of our customers and what they're trying to do. I know that our series will also keep a pulse on up and coming legislation, and so we're a little bit of the wild west at this point in terms of what we're doing and how we're going about it. But as the guidelines and the policies and the laws and so forth become more strict, we will be working within the constraints of those areas as well. Most of this we can already see coming. As Nick mentioned earlier, there's key indicators that are either being developed or have been developed in California, but one of the more progressive territories is the Northeast. And so everything from Massachusetts to New York, and Connecticut are all following quite strict legislation today. So we anticipate that a lot of that's likely to fall down into the Mid-Atlantic region for us as well. Things around new construction, things around making mandatory, EV to existing sites. All that's changing quite rapidly. Randy mentioned something earlier, the national standard. He said, some of these variables that have been out there in the past that are really going to act as almost a proprietary technology to some of these manufacturers. You might have recently seen an announcement where both Ford and GM, was it?
GM.
Yeah, so Ford and GM have developed a cooperative agreement to allow their owners of their vehicles now to participate in the Tesla network. And we're going to start to see more and more of this in our industry as an emerging market. It's week over week with the wow factors that continue to occur. But why would a Ford ever be involved with Tesla, and why would GM ever want to be involved with Tesla? So the answers to these type of questions are what we intend to offer in future series. There's a real reason for it. A lot of it even goes back to the practical application around what Nick said earlier, which is, how do you drive adoption? And if there is this form of charge anxiety that's the problem or the barrier for why the adoption isn't moving more quickly, it's top of mind for these manufacturers as to what it is that they need to do to get this to move more quickly. So these are all things we're going to chat about. And certainly just so many questions, like I said, are continuing to be provided to us around, how to undertake these sorts of projects, their costs, their timelines. We're going to talk in a future series around timeline. These projects don't move as quickly as you might think. The implementation is actually relatively straightforward, but all the things that are needed to either build up to it or get approval for it and the shortfalls in supply chain and so forth are other things we're going to talk about. A lot of lead times on electrical equipment. The utilities are getting busier and busier with these type of requests, which are pushing our timelines out to get things implemented. So we want to talk about that. We realize it's a moving target, but that's what we're trying to do, is to act as a thought leader in the industry and continue to provide awareness. So hopefully you found our session helpful. What Nick has on the screen now is really a good way to follow what it is that we do and how we do it. Our LinkedIn site is up to date pretty regularly, so we try to post things that we feel are really important to the industry in general. Again, whether it's policy, technology change, consolidation within the industry, and a variety of other kind of key topics. So thanks again for joining us, and we look forward to your involvement in series 2. Which Nick, what is the date for that? Do you happen to know?
It is, I believe it's the 13th of next month. July 13th here.
There you go. All right.
Yep.
Hopefully we see everybody back for the 13th, and I hope that you found the session to be of great value to you. Feel free to reach out to us. I know there's lots of different ways, whether it's through our website, through LinkedIn, through IM chat. I mean, we essentially have sort of everything in place to be able to make contact with us. Feel free to ask for either myself and or Nick. Happy to field questions that you might have in the future as well. So again, thank you, and we look forward to seeing you on the 13th.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.